We will talk about cybersecurity today, which is obviously a pressing topic in current times, especially when the entire economy and society goes remote from one day to the other. And both of you also have a background in the military. You have experiences with protecting critical assets. So what are the current challenges, Danny? Maybe you can start, and you have the first take here as being further away from us. What are the current challenges for companies, for nation states in dealing with critical assets in those current times?
So let's put nation states aside, because
Okay.
let's focus on the non-governmental entities. Governmental entities have a different challenge today, and I think that the set of solutions should be different. What we see currently, and I would use the cybersecurity perspective. We are seeing two main challenges. The first one is the lockdown, and the second one is the non-flight. It means, and the automatic outcome of that is that companies started to send some of their staff home due to the fact that they don't have any income, or they cannot operate, or for other reasons. So we have less people, IT people, cybersecurity experts that are there to make sure that monitor whatever infrastructure and solutions we have in place. And we have more hackers looking for potential targets. So we are currently dealing with two companies that were struck by a very aggressive campaign. And the reason that the hackers did it on Thursday is because it is lockdown, and it was the weekend before Easter Monday. So they took challenge of that. So you have less people in monitoring, because the first people you will send home are the IT guys and the cyber experts. They don't bring any revenues. The second part, which and I was speaking with a large insurance company from the UK yesterday, and they have 3 hospitals that are hit by ransomware, because now hackers, unmoral hackers, know that hospitals are very crucial, and they will pay everything just to unlock. So you see a lot of cybercrime taking advantage of this situation, which is the need for hospitals and the lack of monitoring and experts in the companies. The second part that we are seeing as a challenge, some companies that need to provide maintenance or operations to remote sites or customers, which they were used to do that by traveling to this place, need to do that now remotely. And a lot of the customers, and for good reasons, are fearing to open their networks and avoid cyber risks. But on the same time, they are in a dilemma, because if they do not open, they cannot get this maintenance or operations or other services they need from the vendors. So basically, they are in a catch-22 scenario. And those are the main challenges that we see within the last week or so, 2 weeks maybe, in the global industry. And again, I'm not talking about IT-driven organizations like banks, etc. I'm talking about more of the Mittelstand traditional industry.
Yeah, Christian, maybe you can also share your expertise and your findings that you had over the last few weeks, especially in Austria and companies that are dealing within our borders.
I mean, to that, what has been already mentioned by Danny, which I totally agree with. I think we also need to, and he mentioned it already, or he touched it already shortly, is we need to differ also the company sizes. We have larger companies, I think, that can afford themselves establishing mechanisms to prevent, detect, and react to cybercrime activities or any risks. but I think where the major hazard lies is in small businesses. And as we know, like for example in Austria, 90 or 98 percent of all our enterprises are small and medium enterprises, which is in terms of the quantity a lot, yeah, but not in terms of the number of employees, but still it affects major businesses and can affect major branches. So I think it also comes to that it needs solutions that differ from the to the different sizes of classes of the economy. But what we also saw in the last couple of days is, and we have to take it into consideration also as a long-term view, because I think this actual situation around COVID-19, it will change also our general approach in terms of how we work, how we travel in future. And I think governments that were already on the path of developing to a more sustainable, developed, let's say, world, I think that will additionally cause that we will have less physical meetings, more webinars, more virtual conferences, more knowledge transfer that runs through digital media, and more consumption of digital media. And I don't think it will only have effects on economy and enterprises. We should also take, and that makes different enterprises become solution providers, also on a household or societal level, because now when we see how children are being taught at home in the households using digital media tools to communicate and whatnot, how people start buying stuff from at home. Credit card fraud, for example, is one of the most dangerous risks in general, but one of the least perceptive risks. Yeah, so because when we value what is the actual risk and how it is perceived. So I think that's something that can only be encountered, or let's say the actual situation is currently impacting that to a very large extent, I would say.
Okay, so you mentioned solutions that are specifically tailored to various company sizes. Danny, you mentioned a second ago, maybe not sending home your IT guys immediately because they don't drive the revenues. But like generally speaking, do you feel like there are certain steps now that these companies and maybe then also private citizens have to take in this situation to protect themselves? Or has the general public and have these decision makers in the ivory towers understood the major importance of cybersecurity in this current situation?
Maybe if I continue as Danny is muted at the moment.
No, I'm letting you take the question.
Thank you very much.
I'm being polite, you know.
I think I'm not sure understood because if we look at the various risks assessments that are existing now, specifically in terms of cybersecurity risks, yeah, there is enough evidence already that could base political decisions, yeah, and Danny nicely said that the governmental area is a huge separate one, but strategies are already been developed. Yeah, you can encounter by preventing, by detecting, and by reacting to a specific risk. And I think there is still a lot of room for improvement in the prevention part. Yeah, to raise awareness towards risks. And as I mentioned, with that simple example of credit card fraud, which concerns every individual human being that is dealing with online shopping and whatnot. So I think the same can be or should be done, and even increased and highlighted in the future for any kind of business to set a more and stronger focus on the awareness. Let's just take this Zoom meeting. My recent experience just yesterday was regarding Zoom bombing. So this is now an actual phenomenon which is existing, where just, let's say, individuals that want to have some fun are gathering together in any the control of the host, and then just interrupt and play with the ongoing webinar. And for example, so these are phenomena that are at the moment happening and ongoing. And I think with raising the awareness, that would be one measure that how we could encounter that with individuals, but also in the daily work, when it's about the term corona phishing is now somehow well known, where you receive just emails, so it's from external sources. So it's more or less the standard awareness that you anyhow need dealing with risks from let's say cyber attackers. Check the domain where that mail is coming from. Do you know the sender? Is there an executing file in the attachment and something? So these things, I think they should now be even more highlighted. And in terms of detection and reaction, I think there is the huge issue that it depends on the size of the companies. Larger companies, they have own departments dealing with the whole IT departments, with groups that are dealing with the whole security issues, that are checking log files and whatnot to see if some intrusion or so can be detected, because usually it takes some 50 to 100 days or even more until you detect that there is some attack on your network or so. So I think it needs also solutions, especially for the small enterprises that are working from home now with 1, 2, 3 people and yeah, like that. So that's.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the main challenge, and I totally agree with Christian, that for some areas or the vectors continue to be probably the same. So I haven't seen new types of attacks on us as private individuals. The same thing, but now it just got in a larger magnitude because we are doing more online shopping, etc., things like that. And as we said, governments. The problem is with those companies who cannot continue their revenue generating business today if their people are sent home. So every day that goes by, they are losing money because the small shop or the small business or the small factory is closed. Yes, and they don't have the time to wait until somebody will find a solution to the coronavirus. They need to start their business ongoing, and even if they can send just 5 people to the production line, and for those companies, waiting, I think, is not a very good alternative. But on the other way, if they open themselves in a not secured way, then they are putting the entire business in. So they need to partner, and I don't think that they could ever do that by themselves, to find a partner that understands their line of business and expedite what we call, you call it the digitalization process, yeah. Yes, or go into industry 3.0 a little bit more faster than they would thought about before. Because if somebody thinks that this situation will go back or change within the next few weeks, I think that he will find that this is a brand new world. But in every challenge, there is also an opportunity, because markets were accustomed to have a very cheap and a very effective transportation of goods from one market to another. So you would have bought some goods from Far East, China, and this is now the time for local suppliers to regain the trust of the markets, because people need to have these products, and if you need some pharmaceutical or food or even healthcare, and some other goods. I don't know what the situation was in Austria. I know a little bit because I don't know how many of the attendees are familiar with the fact that OTORIO is half Austrian. We are a joint venture of two people. One of them is myself, and the other one is Dr. Wolfgang Gleitner of Andritz von Graz. So I don't know what the situation in Austria is, but in Israel, we had at the beginning a very interesting shortage of toilet paper. And Andritz is a pulp and paper industry, so it was very funny. Having said that, if we are looking at the market, and again, I think that both you, Johannes, and Christian described the Austrian market. If we are looking at the Austrian market, this is not only a time for challenge, it will be a time for opportunity for those who will take the initiatives and drive their businesses through digitalization. That way they can reduce their dependencies on the human factor or the need to work in a very crowded area. So and this is only for markets that will continue to have a market. Again, I know that we have Magna in Graz. I'm not sure if people will buy cars. This is, but I think that people will continue to buy medicine and food and other things that they need to run their daily lives. This is this. I think that the same situation applies to Germany, Switzerland, and maybe a little bit Luxembourg, which has some small industry as well. This is why I always try to separate the large banks or IT institutions, because they have very large departments and they are already digitalized, and the other pre-digitalized industries which were thinking, should I, shouldn't I? I think that the Corona now will separate those, the brave ones who will go to the next phase, and those who will take the time and wait. I think that unfortunately the economy will be very cruel to those who are waiting for something to change. I don't know if Christian will agree with me.
I do. I mean, it will change our economy, and you're right that it is the hazard that it will be that those that are not jumping on the train for digitalization, those will be left behind.
And that is something where I might jump on the bandwagon as well. So you generally think, both of you, that the train has not left the station yet, and that there is still opportunity, because obviously the big issue that we had in Europe in general, doesn't matter if it's Austria or Germany, that the Mittelstand, the medium and small size businesses, which obviously, as Christian mentioned earlier, are the backbone of our economy, have been lacking or lagging behind when it comes to digitalization. And once again, I'm really diving deep on this issue. Do you think that everyone has realized that the time to act is now, and that waiting any longer will be major destruction to their businesses?
The simple answer is time will tell. I don't know. We see some. So yesterday I had a very interesting discussion with a maritime provider that said we need to get to, they're doing not only maritime shipping, also some hydro, and it's not Andritz, yes, electric, and they said we have a lot of facilities in remote places where we cannot travel anymore, and we need maintenance. So our prime cybersecurity projects are safe remote connections. This is what they're going to do for the next 3 months. And we see other ones that are thinking and saying, oh, it's not safe, maybe we should wait and see where things are going. So you see uh, some of these and some of that. I haven't seen a survey that asked CEOs of Mittelstand and companies of how soon they think they need to move. I think that we will see more of it in the next few weeks and months, as people will understand that this is a new situation that will be, first of all, changing all the time, and it will be a part of our lives for at least for the next year and a half. I'm trying to figure. So I had a very interesting talk 2 weeks ago with a CIO of a large airport in Europe. He said, now this is the perfect time for me to do all the IT projects I always dreamt of, because we don't have any passengers. But I'm thinking how much support and financing he will get from his management, as they don't foresee when the airports will open again en masse as they planned 4 months ago.
Christian, any insight that you want to add from Austria on that point that Danny just made, especially when it comes to resources that are being reinvested more or less to drive change now?
One thing where I'm always a bit, let's say, or where I'm becoming not so sure is when it comes about what is our exact capacity driving the whole economy towards a digital age, so that everyone is jumping on that. So mentioned train. My neighbor is working for the Austrian telecom, and we had recently a chat through the garden. When it was that Switzerland was reporting that they are reaching the limit of their bandwidth of the public internet, and in some areas they are really they were at the edge, so to say, and we were discussing that for Austria, and that's where he then said, in fact, we are also at the limit. The only advantage is that when they can regulate it, from a governmental side, so that you reduce, for example, the bandwidth of streaming services and whatnot. So why I'm saying this is just as if we only rely on a digital base, and there is no fallback opportunity, as it is with every disaster. As soon as a blackout happens or any disaster from any natural hazard, we would be then in Stone Age, and the situation would be huge for future then, I think, for bigger companies. A friend of mine is working for a huge Austrian automotive company, so factory. So they are in the production area, and they have now huge issues just by stopping their production line of several cars for a few weeks, because the parts that they are assembling are only technically, from a material point of view, possible to work for a certain amount of time. So they cannot wait with aluminum special parts and whatnot, because they cannot be manufactured further than after 2-3 weeks, because that's only the time when they, let's say, expire. So imagining this whole relying on only digital tools, that's where I don't know myself if this would be the golden solution, just because now everyone is now developing towards that. I don't know what's your opinion on that, Danny.
So we are aligned, and maybe I wasn't clear enough. So I think that digitalization is important and imperative in order to move the industry forward. And I think this is the time and opportunity that I don't know exactly what type of parts so do you mean the metal sheets that are pressed into the car, the
For
aluminum sheets?
example, yes.
Yeah. So think about that.
Window rubber stuff and whatnot. He was
So this
telling
is
me
a
a whole bunch.
excellent. So this is an excellent opportunity now for the all Austrian industry to start and maybe provide these aluminum plates or foil. It comes in a large foil, I know, but because we are working with some large automotive in Germany, and this is what I'm trying to say, that now the new world where you will not be able to get easily parts from Southeast Asia or United States. This is the time for small and medium industries to regain their market share. And this is also an opportunity. It's not, it's really a challenge, and I totally agree. But what I could not see is that we, as the general world and industries and economy, could just freeze and wait until one day everything comes clear. There is the famous Dr. Seuss book, there's a place to stay and wait, and this is the worst place to be. You need to take a decision, and this will probably will separate those companies who will have this coronavirus behind them, and those companies who will struggle and eventually probably will not exist after the coronavirus. It happened in the last similar challenge, and it's not even similar, but in the magnitude, it was the Second World War. So after the Second World War, you had those large companies that continued and just changed the way that they did things, and those who were the newcomers and those who were just left behind. I think that we will see that again. And the main challenge that CEOs and board members have today is to ask themselves, how can we adjust ourselves to this lockdown and challenges in supply chain situation, and continue to do our businesses on one end, and maybe even expand our capabilities if we are embracing digital services and changing the supply chain of existing industries. Because we were, after 20 years of the Toyota just-in-time supply chain method, we understand that it will not continue to work for the next 2 years. And the world cannot wait 2 years, because this is we're accustomed to new speed of doing things. This is not 1954 or 1955, post Second World War. So I do agree with you, but I think that we need to find solutions both to people working remotely on production lines, and both for having the supply chain in place using regional providers.
So maybe now with a last question, we've already moved on to a very macroeconomic scale. Maybe as a last question for both of you gentlemen, also looking into the future and now coming back a little bit to the idea of cybersecurity. What, in your opinion, are some very concrete steps for companies, for private individuals to protect themselves in the future? Danny, you mentioned it earlier, partnering with other companies, but what are, in your opinion, now the next steps that need to be taken, especially when this digital wave is being embraced?
So let's start with individuals. I've been practicing cybersecurity for almost 30 years, long before we call it cybersecurity. And I know that everything is possible. So I'm very, let's call it conservative, in which websites I'm visiting, who I'm putting my credit cards within, but you cannot again avoid using the modern system. So I just would emphasize for parents to make to be very transparent to what the children are. I'm a father for 3 children, so which websites they're visiting, which apps they're running. This is maybe as a father, as a parent. Secondly, be very cautious with whom you're. Be smart. And when it's not that easy, but it is possible to identify when you are under a phishing campaign or a social engineered mail or SMS. So don't be too rapid in letting people have your private information, whether this is the social number or it's the credit card or whatever, because you never understand. I'm always asking myself, why should he have this piece of data? Be very careful with what you're doing. This is as individuals. As governments, which I said we should refrain. I think this is the time that governments should take a more proactive approach in defending their economy and assisting the private sector, because governments are relying on the funding that will come from the private sector to protect the private sector. But I think this is time that even the private sector is struggling due to the stop of economy. And I think that governments should take the effort and assist private companies within their nations to be protected. And as the others, I know that this is time for cuts. I know that because we are doing the same thing here and everywhere, but do not cut in cybersecurity. It could be a catastrophe to your business. So, and it doesn't mean that you have to hire the experts. You don't have to have this in car. There are service providers, there are service companies like ourselves or others in Austria. Use an expert team that you can rely on and you trust, because during the next few months, cutting in IT is not a smart idea. You want to expand your business, and cutting in cybersecurity, it means that you are basically leaving the front door open to bad guys, and there are a lot of bad guys there. There is a flourishing cybercrime economy.
Christian, anything to add to that?
Yes, only that I totally agree, just not to cut in any kind of security measures. To that, I want to stress out that what it also needs is a general whole of society approach, also from the governmental side. We saw now, due to the Corona crisis, what is possible, what decisions are possible, even totally unpopular political decisions are possible all of a sudden. So, but I'm not sure, honestly, if this will be a takeaway from that whole situation to, let's say, any political leader looking at how decisions are being made all over the globe. But what I mean with the whole of society approach is exactly that what Danny touched as well, is we need to start bringing that into the mindset of each and every person, and that I think can only start with our children, with school, with training and education, and that would in the long run will bring us that cultural change that we in Austria or mid Europe, except or in Europe in general, except with Switzerland, that we missed. So that the shift into a more let's say deterministic risk society. Nowadays, we are more on a probabilistic scale where if some hazard or some risk will appear to a certain extent, then we set measures. Otherwise, we don't. Yeah. other countries such as Switzerland, they also take into consideration a residual risk. So if there is a risk obvious, then they take the relevant measures. And I think that changes a whole society, like it has been done in Japan or so since decades. We in DCNA, we are dealing with security and disaster research, so focusing specifically on natural hazards and their impact and these phenomena. And let's just take earthquake measures. What do we do in mid-Europe in terms of earthquake? We don't even know how it feels, what happens and what not, because we haven't had one. But only recently in Zagreb, in Croatia, there was let's say a major earthquake, luckily with only one let's say indirect fatality. But that whole situation happened during a corona crisis, where you are supposed to be locked inside your house, and during an earthquake you should be going somewhere outside, and then we have a nuclear power plant close by. So this would be like a perfect worst case scenario where we are just not prepared at all. And now just compare that with the Fukushima crisis. I was myself involved there. In Tokyo, but in the aftermath of the disaster, and they encountered really that huge threat coming from an earthquake, tsunami, and then that nuclear disaster due to the power plant. So I think people there, they know how to react whenever what comes. Yeah, I don't think we do. And we also don't take the risk, we don't perceive the risk accordingly. And I think that can only change by starting at the very beginning, and then having the aim in the long run to change the society towards a more resilient society.
Well, on that note, guys, thank you so much. Changes in the air, as you just mentioned it, Christian. Danny, thank you so much. Christian, thank you so very much for spending some time with us this evening. Thank you very much for these interesting insights. We will, of course, share the video with the community. And once again, enjoy your night. Stay safe.